Look at your little nest egg, Chloe said, waving my bank statements in the air like a trophy. Thanks for the rainy day fund. My son Julian sat right next to her, staring at nothing and saying absolutely nothing. I reached out and calmly took the papers from her hand. I set my teacup down, gave her a thin smile, and made a silent vow. As of today, the free trial for my life has officially expired. Look at these savings. Thanks for the backup fund, my daughter-in-law Chloe chirped, fluttering my bank statements in my face. She was standing in the middle of my living room with a look of pure triumph. Julian was slumped on the sofa, silent. He was staring at his shoes as if the rug's pattern had suddenly become the most fascinating thing on earth. I'd only left the papers on the dining table for a second, while I went to the kitchen to make some tea. Chloe had pounced. She and Julian had been living in the upstairs suite of my house for 2 years now. At first, it was supposed to be a temporary setup, just a way for them to save up for a down payment on a place of their own. But months had bled into years, and Chloe's sense of entitlement had grown by the day. She already treated my house like it was her deed, and my savings like her personal line of credit. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply set the teapot down, walked over to her, and firmly pulled the papers from her hand. This is my private folder. I said, my voice low but steady. Chloe rolled her eyes. Don't get all worked up. We're family. Julian and I want to remodel the upstairs bathroom, and your money is perfect for that. I mean, it's not like you need much down here anyway. Julian gave a weak nod without even looking at me. I didn't feel hurt. I felt a cold, icy clarity. For months, I'd swallowed little disrespects. I'd done their laundry, bought their groceries, and quietly covered every utility bill for the whole house. I thought I was helping my son. But this wasn't help anymore. This was a hostile takeover of my own home. I smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. The tea's getting cold, was all I said. I turned around, walked into my home office, and locked the door. There was no point in arguing. Logic was wasted on Chloe, and Julian would just defend her to avoid a fight. I sat at my desk and opened the top drawer. Inside was a heavy ring of spare keys for every single room in this house. If they thought they had full access to my life, they were dead wrong. The era of sharing was officially over. The next morning started early. By the time Chloe came downstairs around 9, I was already dressed and finished with my coffee. I heard the familiar rattle of her plastic laundry basket. She was headed for the basement where my high-end washer and dryer lived machines I'd paid for that she had treated as her own for 2 years. A few seconds later, I heard her rattling the basement door. Then came the frantic pounding. "Maura!" "The door is stuck," she yelled down the hall. I set my newspaper aside and stepped into the hallway. "It's not stuck, Chloe. It's locked," I replied calmly. She dropped the laundry basket with a heavy thud. "Why would you lock the basement? I have to do laundry. Julian needs his shirts for tomorrow." I looked her straight in the eye. "I've decided to keep my private areas locked from now on. The basement, the office, and the downstairs bathroom are off limits starting today. You have your own small bathroom upstairs." Chloe stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "Are you serious? How am I supposed to wash clothes?" I gave a little shrug. "There's a great laundromat about 5 minutes down the road. Or you could buy your own stackable unit for the bathroom upstairs. The hookups are already there." Her face turned a bright, blotchy red. She whirled around to Julian, who was shuffling down the stairs, looking half asleep. "Julian, tell your mother to open the door." "This is ridiculous." Julian rubbed the back of his neck nervously. Mom, come on. This is kind of childish. Just let her do the wash. I crossed my arms. My house, my machines, my rules. I need my privacy. The conversation is over. I didn't wait for a rebuttal. I grabbed my purse, opened the front door, and stepped out into the crisp morning air. I left them standing there in the hallway, surrounded by their own confusion. I hadn't made any accusations or raised my voice. I had simply drawn a line, a very real physical line made of wood and metal. It felt surprisingly good. The first step was taken. 3 days passed in a deep, icy silence. Chloe ignored me with a dramatic flare, while Julian gave me those sad puppy looks every time we crossed paths. On Wednesday afternoon, Phase 2 went into effect. Up until now, I'd been the one footing the bill for the massive weekly grocery haul. The big French door fridge in my kitchen was always stocked to the brim, mostly with the expensive organic produce and specialty deli items Chloe put on the list. This time, I only shopped for myself. A few bagels, some cheese vegetables, and a nice bottle of wine. I left the rest of the fridge pointedly empty. When Chloe got home from work, I heard her march straight into the kitchen. The fridge door swung open. Total silence. 2 minutes later, she was standing in my living room doorway. Maura, where's the food? Did you forget to shop? We have friends coming over tonight. I looked up from my book and leisurely marked my page. I didn't forget. I just bought what I needed. Chloe crossed her arms, her nails digging into her sleeves. And what are Julian and I supposed to eat? What about dinner for our friends? That's for you to figure out, I said easily. Since you view my savings as your rainy day fund, I figured it was time you started handling your own daily expenses. My money is staying in my account from now on. You can't do that. We don't pay rent here because we're supposed to be saving for our future. She snapped her voice, hitting a shrill note. I closed my book and set it on the side table. Exactly. You don't pay rent. You don't pay for electricity. But as of today, you pay for your own food. Safeway is only 10 minutes away. I stood up, smoothed out my sweater, and walked past her into the kitchen. I grabbed an apple from my small fruit bowl and took a loud, satisfying crunch. The sound of the front door slamming behind Chloe a moment later was pure music to my ears. Friday morning, I was woken up by loud voices outside my kitchen window. I pulled the curtain back and saw a white van idling in my driveway. 2 guys in work gear were unloading heavy toolboxes. Chloe was out in the garden, gesturing wildly and pointing at my prized rose bushes. She was loudly explaining to the men where the new cedar deck was supposed to go. She hadn't even had the decency to ask me. She just assumed I'd pay for it and keep my mouth shut, like I always did. I calmly threw on a cardigan, stepped into my shoes, and headed out the back door. Morning, guys, I said politely to the contractors. They nodded back. Chloe turned around, her expression hardening instantly. Maura, go back inside. We're just going over the dimensions for the new seating area. It's going to look great. I ignored her entirely and looked at the foreman. I'm sorry for the confusion, gentlemen, but there won't be any construction on this property today. I am the sole owner of this home, and I haven't authorized any work. The man scratched his head, looking confused, but the lady here said the financing was all set and we should start today. The lady was mistaken. I said, my voice firm and quiet. There will be no deck. Please pack up your tools. I'd hate for you to waste any more of your time. Chloe took a threatening step toward me. Julian and I want to actually use this yard. You just sit inside all day anyway. I didn't even look at her as the contractors started loading their gear back into the van. They clearly wanted no part of a family feud. My yard, my roses, I said simply. If you want a deck, you'll have to buy a house to put it on. I waited until the van pulled out of the driveway. Then I carefully locked the garden gate and tucked the key deep into my pocket. Saturday morning was shopping day. For months, Chloe had been using my car, a well-maintained silver SUV, as if it were her own. She never paid for gas insurance or the oil changes. As I sat at the kitchen table working on a crossword puzzle, she walked in. Without saying hello, she reached for the small wooden bowl on the entryway table where I usually kept my keys. Her hand hit the bottom of the empty bowl. She started digging around, then looked around the room frantically. Maura. Where are the car keys? I need to get to the mall. I carefully filled in a 4-letter word before looking up. The keys are tucked away safely in my purse, I said. I'll be needing the car myself later. Chloe let out an annoyed groan. You have got to be kidding me. You almost never go out on Saturdays. Julian and I have important errands. Just give me the keys. I'll be back in 2 hours. No, I said. It was a complete sentence. I didn't offer an explanation. No apologies, no long-winded debate. I just went back to my puzzle. Are you actually losing it? She screamed. Are we supposed to take the bus? That takes forever. Then you should probably head to the stop soon, I replied without looking up. The number 42 bus runs every half hour. If you hurry, you'll make it. Chloe glared at me, stomped her foot, and ran upstairs to cry to Julian. I heard muffled, heated voices from above. 10 minutes later, the two of them left the house. Through the window, I watched them trudge toward the bus stop in a light drizzle. Chloe looked furious. Julian had his head tucked down. I took a long sip of my warm coffee. The car was safe in the garage, and it was going to stay there until I felt like driving it. It felt wonderful. Sunday afternoon, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, Chloe's parents, the Millers, were standing on the mat with big smiles and a box from a bakery. Happy Sunday, Maura. We're here for coffee, Mrs. Miller chirped. Before I could say a word, Chloe flew down the stairs. Mom, Dad, come on in, she shouted, pushing past me. She led them straight into my living room like she owned the place. Have a seat. I'm sure Maura will get some coffee started for us, Chloe said, looking at me expectantly. In the old days, I would have scurried into the kitchen, pulled out the good china, and played the perfect hostess just to keep the peace. Those days were over. I stayed in the hallway and pulled my elegant gray wool coat off the rack. I'm sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Miller, I said, kind but firm. Chloe didn't mention she was hosting guests today. I actually already have plans for the afternoon. I buttoned my coat and grabbed my handbag. Chloe's jaw literally dropped. Maura, you can't just leave. We need the espresso machine and the large mugs. Where are you even going? I gave a soft smile. It's my Sunday off. The espresso machine in my kitchen is private now, but you're more than welcome to boil some water on the stove upstairs. Feel free to make yourselves comfortable in the hallway or in your suite. I turned back to her bewildered parents. Have a lovely afternoon. With that, I walked out the front door and pulled it shut behind me. I didn't actually have a single plan, but a walk through the park in the sunshine sounded like heaven. I knew they'd be sitting in my living room, annoyed with no coffee, no fancy dishes, and no mother-in-law to wait on them. I took a deep breath. The autumn air was crisp. I felt lighter than I had in years. Monday brought the next logical step. I had spent the weekend going through my filing cabinets. Up until now, I'd been paying every single bill, electricity, water, gas, for the whole house. Julian and Chloe had taken it for granted while keeping their floor at 72 degrees and taking 20-minute showers. I sat at the kitchen table and drew up a detailed, fair breakdown of the costs. Since the upstairs unit had its own sub-meters, the math was incredibly simple. I wrote it all out on a clean sheet of paper. That evening, I knocked on their door upstairs. Julian opened it, looking exhausted. "Hey, Mom. What's up?" he asked tentatively. I handed him the paper. "This is your monthly bill for utilities. Since you're both working full-time and living your own lives, it's only fair you carry your own weight. Please have the transfer in my account by the 5th of every month." Chloe appeared behind him and snatched the paper. Her eyes bugged out at the total. $300. "This is a scam. You're trying to kick us out of our own home." "This isn't your home, Chloe," I said in a calm, flat voice. "It's my home. You are guests living here for free. I'm not even charging you rent, just the actual costs of what you consume. If it's too expensive, you should turn down the heat or find an apartment that fits your budget better." Julian tried to play peacemaker. "Mom, can't we talk about this? The money is a little tight right now." "Is a little tight." I looked my son in the eye. "You're a grown man, Julian. You have a good job. It is no longer my responsibility to subsidize your lifestyle. The choice is yours." I turned and walked back downstairs. No more debating. I hadn't made any legal threats. I just introduced them to the reality of being an adult. The cold water of the real world was going to hit them very soon. Wednesday morning, a large delivery truck pulled up at the curb. Two burly guys hopped out and opened the back. They started sliding out a massive, modern, navy blue velvet sectional. I stood in the doorway and knew exactly what was happening. Chloe had mentioned several times that my classic leather sofa was too old-fashioned. She had obviously decided to replace it on her own, assuming I'd just roll over once it was in the room. Chloe came racing down the stairs with a triumphant grin. "Surprise, I thought we'd spruce up the living room. You can just put that old leather thing out on the curb for the trash." She tried to push past me to show the movers where to go. I planted myself firmly in the door frame. "Morning," I called out to the delivery drivers. "Do you have the paperwork for this?" The driver nodded and handed me his clipboard. The address was right, but the name on the order was Chloe's. "I'm so sorry you guys had to drive all this way," I said politely. "But the person who ordered this is a tenant in the upstairs suite. This sofa won't fit through that narrow stairwell, and there is absolutely no room for it in my downstairs living area." Chloe's eyes went wide. "Are you crazy? I bought that sofa." "It's going in the living room," I looked at her coolly. "My living room, my furniture." "You didn't ask permission." "It's not coming inside." I turned back to the driver. "You can take it back." Delivery refused. The movers looked relieved they didn't have to carry the beast. They slid the sectional back into the truck without a second thought. Chloe threw a fit on the porch as the truck pulled away. "That was expensive." "You're ruining everything," she screamed. I gave a small shrug. "Next time, maybe you should check the measurements and check with the homeowner." I quietly closed the door. The breaking point was inevitable. Friday night, Julian and Chloe were sitting at the kitchen table. I'd allowed them 30 minutes of kitchen time. They looked beat. The cost of groceries, the utility bills, and the daily bus commutes were draining their nerves and their bank accounts. They realized I wasn't budging. I walked into the kitchen and set a folder on the table. "What's this?" Julian asked, sounding defeated. "It's a standard lease agreement for the upstairs suite," I explained. "Since we're running separate households now, it's time to make it official. The rent is set at the fair market rate for this neighborhood. No more favors. You use the space You pay for it. Chloe flipped through the pages. Her face went pale. We can't afford this. With the utilities and the groceries and not having the car, we'll have nothing left. I nodded, not out of pity, but out of understanding. That's what being an adult feels like, Chloe. You spent years spending my money and trying to control my property because I let you out of love. When you found my bank statements, you thought my life savings belonged to you. You forgot who actually owns this house. Julian stared at the contract. For the first time, I saw a flicker of realization in his eyes. He knew I was right. He had been riding my coattails to avoid dealing with his wife's demands. Mom, this is a lot, he whispered. I gave you a choice, I said. You can sign the lease and live here as adult tenants. Or you can find your own apartment by the end of next month. Either way works for me. I left the folder on the table and walked away. The power was back where it belonged. They weren't spoiled kids anymore. They were finally being forced to grow up. The silence in that kitchen was deafening. 3 weeks later, moving boxes were piled high in the entryway. Chloe and Julian had decided to move out. Without my financial backing and my free services as a cook, driver, and maid, the big house was simply too much for them. They'd found a modest 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. The atmosphere while they packed was tense but quiet. No more screaming matches. Reality had taken the wind out of their sails. I stood in my living room and watched as Julian carried the last big box down the stairs. He looked older, humbled even. He set the box down, walked over and gave me a quick hug. I'm sorry, Mom, he muttered. We really got it wrong. I get why you had to do this. I patted his back gently. It's okay, Julian. Sometimes you have to get pushed out of the nest to figure out how to fly. My door is always open for you as a guest. Chloe walked past me without a word, clutching a desk lamp, her lips pressed into a thin line. She might not have learned her lesson yet, but that wasn't my problem anymore. I was done raising her. As the front door clicked shut and their car pulled away, I took a long, deep breath. The house was wonderfully, beautifully silent. No more snide comments, no more people trying to spend my hard-earned money. I went into the kitchen, brewed a fresh pot of coffee, and looked out at my garden. The roses were in full bloom, glowing in the afternoon sun. My savings were safe in my account, and my keys were in my pocket. I wasn't a lonely widow or a doormat. I was the master of my own domain. I took my mug, sat down on my comfortable leather sofa, and just sat there. The total peace of my own home was without a doubt the best gift I'd ever given myself. Shh.